Hello, and welcome to another fantastic video for ICMI 2021. As always, I'm joined by Vernon Meigs, and today we have X-Man. Not X-Men, X-Man, because he is the X-Man. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm fine. Uh,
So for those who don't know, X-Man was part of ICMI last year. Be sure to check out his video, but he is a member of the National Coalition for Men. He does
yes.
a lot of activism in the Chicago area. Well, let's just start with that. What are some of the things that you do that people should know about?
Well, for the NTFM, I came up with this idea that we should create our own prostate cancer awareness ribbons that I usually wear on my work shirt so that more people will be aware of prostate cancer awareness, kind of like breast cancer awareness, pink ribbons. We have a blue one for prostate cancer. Also, I used to write a few articles for A Voice for Men once every blue moon. And I run my own men's rights website called Humanity, where I give sources for men to seek help, seek mental help, physical help. And I just give people news updates on things related to men's issues, be it a success or a failure or something negative or positive. Yeah.
How have people, say, in your work and in your personal life reacted to your activism? Because you mentioned like the idea of wearing T-shirts and stuff like that. So have they responded well? Do they ask questions, or is some of it negative?
I think most of it's actually positive. I've even gotten people at my own job to wear ribbons and all that, so I think that helps, the simple act of just the reason I like the prostate cancer awareness ribbon or men's health is because people can find ways to dismiss men's issues or men's human rights, but they can't dismiss men's health. That's a basic thing that isn't going to cause much controversy. Just a simple health update, things that'll slowly help you integrate and normalize that type of our reactions to men's issues.
So I want to take a step back for a moment. Now, something that Vernon mentioned to me that we actually kind of share this experience is that when you first started speaking about men's issues, you didn't know that there was an actual movement out there. And I'm curious what led you to start speaking about men's issues. Have you been like this all your life, or did something recently happen that's like, hey, we need to speak about things like, oh, there's a whole other movement here?
Yeah, it's sort of like that. I've always had like these short ideas. It's kind of like in life, you go through life and you recognize an injustice, but you don't think too much about it. You don't think deeper than that. My parents would tell me the harms of child support system works and how so many men get arrested and how sometimes the child support payment doesn't match the income that you're getting and things like that. I would think it as like an injustice, but I wouldn't think further and be like, oh, well, this is an entire human rights violation that there should be a movement for it. I would think of things like about the stigma of men hitting women while there's no stigma of women hitting men. And there's a stigma of men speaking out about it. But, again, I would just dismiss that as, okay, a slight small society problem. I never thought about it as a big human rights thing. It's just that as I got older and years went by and I started recognizing so many of these issues are racking up around men, I'm wondering, like, why isn't there a movement that focuses on it, But apparently there is, as we see.
So aside from the fact that I've seen your last year's ICMI with Elizabeth Hobson and Brian Martinez, one thing I've been recently impressed by is relatively recent article you had on your blog site critiquing Joe Rogan, actually. The article went something along the lines of, Joe Rogan started out speaking as if men's rights advocates had a point and actually combating feminists, but that kind of got flaky, and he would kind of bash male victims of domestic violence, etc., and make fun of them. What inspired that article, and do you have any further thoughts stemming from it?
Well, the only inspiration is that I usually jump on any topic related to men's issues to make sure I'm always up to date. The Joe Rogan thing, when I originally saw his videos, his newer videos that was critiquing men's issues versus older videos, it just seemed like such a stark difference. It's like almost as if two different people were saying it. Almost literally, because he was a lot younger in the older video, so it's literally like almost two different people were saying it. But I was thinking there had to be a specific change, because it's not like he was changing due to new information or that he was changing due to some follow-up beliefs. Is that he was doing like a complete 180. He was using the same talking points that he himself were debunking back then. It's like clearly he changed his opinion either due to societal pressure or due to just not wanting to be on that train anymore for whatever reason. But it was just very noticeable for me.
Going with Joe Rogan, how do you feel about this? I mean, here's a man who seemed to like just not give a shit about anything, would talk about everything, and then all of a sudden he's just a shell of his former self. What was your reaction to that?
It's actually not as surprising because I've seen like multiple authors, polarizing authors who talk like proudly about other things, about other activism things, and they'll talk proudly about Black issues or women's issues or other things. But when the concept of men's issues come up, they just like suddenly get like stage fright. It's like like a bunch of silence, and they suddenly can't speak on a topic, or they speak in such a soft tone, like they're in fear of a backlash if they press too hard on the issue. Almost kind of like expected to an extent that I would see him like not be full blown in favor of it, or see him do a complete 180, because it's just how everyone seems to be acting in general nowadays.
Do you think it's more of a nervous reaction, or just you want to save face and you just don't want to be seen as an extremist, maybe?
I think it's more, well, for Joe Rogan, I think it's more of the did not want it to save face and not want to be seen as the extremist. I would say for other people, they're usually part of a specific political agenda or specific political group, so that and men's issues doesn't go along with political agenda. So it would make sense that they would have to try to downplay it.
I also saw that you wrote an article on Bill Burr, specifically his SNL monologue. What is your opinion of Bill Burr?
Bill Burr is actually one of my favorite comedians, so I'm obviously going to be biased. No, I what Bill Burr was saying about white women, I have been trying to bring that up in my articles. I've wrote a few articles either for Voice for Men and on my own website, and I had slightly brought up this issue about white women and their inability to take responsibility for their history and racism, and they're always trying to point the finger at white men and saying that makes them like an advocate for Black people. Like, I don't know. I usually think being an advocate requires you to take responsibility for your own opinions, not point the finger at someone else. But I was just happy that someone actually was able to successfully say it in front of a live audience. And he got slight backlash when he was saying it at first, but he just doubled down on it to let them know he wasn't letting them get away with that. So that was very interesting.
So you've imparted to me about methods to effectively communicate and promote men's issues, and how to effectively have conversations about manhood without using terms like toxic masculinity. Now, could you elaborate more on this? And what are your thoughts in particular about toxic masculinity?
Well, as I've told people this, the thing about feminism, if you'll know that there were three phases of feminism. The first philosophical phase was that men's issues didn't exist at all, and that only women's issues existed, and there was a false comparison between gender and race, saying that similar to racism, that only sexism would affect women and not men. And the second phase was them acknowledging that men's issues existed, but making it a competition and saying that women's issues are worse, and therefore that's why they should be prioritized over men's issues. So after all of that, the failure of them to stop the rise of men's issues, because now we have an NCFM group that's been getting legal recognition. Now we have fathers groups that have been getting shared parenting bills passed, and comedians making about men's issues. They did sort of a complete 180 and started pretending as if they were always in favor of men's issues in the first place, and that this was their plan all along. Is men's issues is a feminist issue, and that's where toxic masculinity comes in. Basically, it's like they're acknowledging men's issues exist, but they're blaming men for their own issues, and they're saying, and it gives women a pass basically, so that women don't have to change, like because usually when a person is an ally for your cause, they self-reflect on how their behaviors affect you, how their behaviors and their actions affect you. But in this case, women are saying, like, as an ally, they're like, all your issues are your own fault, and by telling you your issues are your own fault, I'm an ally of you. It's just it's silly. It's not that what they're saying is completely wrong that men don't also play a role in their own issues is that they're specifically claiming as if that's the only thing and that's the only problem, and that's simply not the case.
Yeah, that's something that I bring up in my upcoming book series, that one of the arguments we get from feminism is that patriarchy was created for the benefit of men by men, but it also hurts men. And it's like, well, this would have to be the worst possible patriarchy in human existence.
Yes, and why doesn't that
work? A system to hurt us. So,
and why doesn't that work with other systems, other forms of oppressives? Usually, oppressive systems only hurts us, the specific group, and benefits another group. Why would it hurt the people that it's supposed to be helping? That's never happened in any other oppressive system. So that's.
So, in what ways have you tried to help out the men's movement? I mean, certainly you're an orator, but have there been any other activities that you've done? Oh, and you also mentioned the blue ribbon, but beyond those two, is there anything more that you have done?
Yes, I tried to I wrote an article as like a guide for the different men's movements in existence, because I noticed that due to media slander, media propaganda, and due to just genuine confusion from other people, there's a big miscommunication of like which men's group is which. There's a men's rights movement, there's MGTOW, there's an incel group, there's the men's liberation group, there's a mythopoetic men's group. I decided to make an entire guide, like going into detail about which group is which, and what their opinions are, and what their beliefs are, and what they fight for, so that people will know how to separate which, one from the other. Because I think that's a big one. I think whenever another men's group messes up, it almost like universally falls back on us, and we have to take responsibility. Like men's rights groups have to take responsibility for other groups that they're not even a part of. It's like,
it seems like the media is incredibly hungry to actually blame the entirety of what they would call the manosphere, just because one segment of one bigger segment screwed up on something. So they're foaming at the mouth, as you said in one of your articles, just absolutely waiting for that chance to pounce on men's groups for being men's groups, just because of one thing they want to latch on.
Right.
Thinking back on your steps, the men's issues don't exist, and then men's issues do, but women's is worse. One thing that comes to mind is the treatment of male genital mutilation, right? It's like, at first they say men's issues don't exist. Some of us bring up male genital mutilation as it happens to infants, but then they would counter that female genital mutilation is much, much worse.
Right.
What are your thoughts on things like that?
Like I said, that's the same. Human rights is simply not a competition, and the fact that that's even brought up tells you where the mindset of feminists are as people. Whether or not it's worse, it shouldn't even be a topic of conversation. It's still bad. It's still bad, and it needs to be fixed. Both need to be fixed. As I've told people, I'm a Black man, so obviously I'm going to be biased and say that I thought Black people have it worse than, say, other races. But that doesn't mean other races shouldn't be allowed to speak out about their issues. Doesn't mean Asians or natives or Hispanics shouldn't speak out about their issues just because I am being biased and think that I have it worse. Like it's not a competition. It's just a simple act of righting a wrong. We're fighting for what's right, fighting against an injustice. So yeah, I mean, with circumcision, yeah, even if what they're saying is true, even if female genital mutilation is worse, well, okay, well then you just focus on fixing female genital mutilation, and we'll focus on fixing male genital mutilation. There's no reason to stop us from doing that because you think you have it worse.
Seriously, you should put "human rights is not a competition" on a T-shirt. You should make a whole slogan, because that is just brilliant right there. I think that is a very good message to have. Human rights is not a competition. I also noticed that you mentioned on your website issues about racism, and I'm wondering if racism intersects with men's rights for you in any way.
To an extent, I try not to, force all of these issues on racism into men's issue, because then, that kind of derails the point about men's issues altogether if you focus too much on it. But Yeah, like I said, a lot of big things that men talk about, like false rape accusations, could be traced back to the to back then when black men would be accused by white women of sexual harassment, and they would be rushed through these speedy trials with virtually no due process, uh, and sometimes lynched. You can. There was this isn't an unknown topic, but I've read a book a few years ago. It was called The Women's Clan. That there was a women's clan called the Invisible Empire, and their strategies were to utilize their bodies and claim that black men were going to rape them or assault them, and use it as a reason for why they should be murdered and lynched. The same, and just other things like education, the education system. The black men's education system has always been screwed up. There's always, there's always the prison, been targeted by the prison system. Black men were always universally targeted by the prison system historically. So I would say there's a correlation between race and gender, but it's up to other people whether or not they think they should acknowledge that, or whether or not they think they should keep that at a distance.
Something that we see a lot in this, going on what you're describing, is that when we describe, like, hey, a great number of men are in prison, the immediate conversation turns to, well, more black people are in prison than white people.
Right.
But to understand that statistic, there is a disparity, and it's true, but the disparity is very small compared to disparity between men and women. In your experience, have you encountered other things related to men's issues where they try to steer the conversation away from men versus women and made it about race?
Sort of. I would say that the whole due process thing was one of them, where like people acknowledged that men, when people were saying that men's issues were or men were being denied due process, a lot of feminists would try to say that only black men were being denied due process historically, and then try to claim that white men are just unusually exaggerating, that they're going to be falsely accused of sexual assault or sexual harassment. But it's like this for just about anything that's related, that has a racial connotation to it. Any men's issue that has a racial connotation to it. Back to the thing you said about prison, they'll speak about black men being targeted by the prison system, but they'll only compare them to white men, which is a silly assertion because white men aren't the ones being heavily favored in the prison system. In fact, women of all races have lower incarceration rates than white men for the same crime. So clearly there's a bigger gender disparity than a racial disparity. And so why compare black men to white men versus comparing men to women in general, and just acknowledging that it heavily targets black men as well.
So on the same lines of race, one subject you bring up in your article on your blog site is the issue of tribalism among the black community, as if they feel isolated, as if they can only trust each other. Can you talk more about that in terms of men's issues?
Yeah, so I would say that basically black women, so basically, black racism is already a big thing in the United States of America, where people already feel divided by race in the first place. And it was supposed to be black men and black women were at one point united, but then a large group of black women went for feminism, went for these false statements about female empowerment and the ability to basically, trash men like they see their white counterparts of women doing. And so now black men just feel like isolated, when half of your entire community, you're just gonna like choose a fake female empowerment over actual empowerment of your community. There's a problem there. And I feel like black men, when they see somebody, when they see people saying like, we all should work with this together, we all should, work together as all races, or come together in unity. I think they have trouble buying it because historically that's never been the case for them. Historically, they've always been left at the end and left at the bottom in a moment of unity.
Looking at another marginalized group, you write about homosexuality and the relation to men's rights. Now, I'd actually like to read this article, but could you give us a synopsis of what this is about and why this was something important for you?
It was something important because I just didn't see it written about enough. Basically, the biggest stigma against homosexuality is that essentially men are told that they're not real men if they don't get a girlfriend or a woman when they grow up and become a man. So when a guy dates another guy, that kind of harbors on the same situation. You're not getting a woman. Kind of same thing with being an incel or being MGTOW. Like you're not getting a woman. So therefore they're saying you're not a real man. And plus it's the fact that other men are going to be upset about that because as men we've worked our asses off to get those women. Like we've even sacrificed, like I said, sacrificed our issues, sacrificed our humanity, sacrificed arguments with women and all that for the simple act of getting laid. Well, some more than others. Some have better self-control, but I mean, some guys have literally won't even argue with women because they think, well, the woman's not going to date me anymore. Or I'm not going to get laid because I'm having arguments with women. So because they sacrifice so much for that, for meaningless sex or for a relationship, they feel like, they feel offended that a gay man could just sit there and do what he wants and date whoever the fuck he wants, and not have that same hold, that same rest hold on himself, that same responsibility on his shoulders.
Well, a quick follow-up to that, because I think you're talking about a lot of things at once, and that's great how all interconnected it is. But I'm going to quote Paul Elam. He says that every man is one blowjob away from being blue-pilled. How do you feel? Is that a true statement, or do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're blue pilled in reality or if they're blue pilled on the outside, like they put on that face of being like blue pilled. Because it seems as if basically it's hard to find a woman who's not only not a feminist, but a woman who doesn't have these feminist like beliefs. Because even women who aren't feminists have these feminist level beliefs on things related to child support and things related to male violence and things related to male victims of domestic and sexual violence. They still have those beliefs, those ignorant beliefs. And so it's like you're sitting there, you're debating in your head, if I continue to do this, I may never get any, I may end up being lonely and never have anyone. Well, if I can just get into a relationship with someone and try to keep my thoughts about those issues at a minimum. And I think what Paul Elam is saying is like, yeah, the simple act of once you're in that relationship is you're pretty much keeping your thoughts on those ideas at a minimum to the point that it's virtually ineffective now.
So aside from working on your blog, what are some other things or projects that you're currently working on? Is there anything that you can divulge, or is it just kind of business as usual for you?
Well, yeah, as you know, I'm part of the NCFM, so I was trying to get into contact with fathers' rights groups in Illinois so that they can try to get a share, because I think a shared parenting bill is probably an easy bill, to pass compared to all the other bills. I'm always trying to find like the best, the easiest route for us to certain successes, the ones that's gonna, the ones that's more likely to happen. And I think a shared parenting bill is a lot easier to pass than say a domestic violence bill for male victims, because that's going to require a long laundry of refunctioning of the brain and people having a complete outlook on history and life. But a shared parenting bill is more about having mothers and fathers both in the household, and it's been passed in other countries and in other states in the US. So I think it's more likely to get passed here.
Looking at just Illinois, because we can certainly look at all the states and all the countries, as you mentioned, but what is the present state of shared parenting and the family court system in Illinois?
As far as shared parenting goes, I believe it's still currently on hold. A lot of politicians just put laws on hold when they don't want to deal with it. So you have to keep making noise. You have to keep making noise for them to force them to deal with it. And so since I think the fathers' rights group in Illinois is already big, and the NCFM is growing every year, especially in Chicago, especially. I think if two big legal groups join together to get that idea passed, I think it'll be harder to ignore. It'll force them to try to start making a decision. And like I said, if you fail the first time, you just try again. Most bills most big bills, had to keep being reintroduced over and over and over again until they got passed.
And that's great that you got to keep making noise. Politicians kind of put it on hold. But what I was looking for was more like, is it pretty much decided that if a man and woman go into family court wanting to get shared custody, that the court's going to strongly favor the woman? Or is there some level of shared parenting in the process? None at all? Or do you know that?
I'm not positive. I know that that currently the National Parents Organization has been pushing for there to be a shared parenting bill where basically it's going to be immediately decided during the court system that both men and women will have near equal custody of their children. That it wouldn't be siding specifically with the mother or siding specifically against the father. It would be on the law unless proven otherwise. Unless it's proven that someone's abusive, unless it's proven that a parent is flat out abusive or something like that, then, or not taking care of their children at all, then, generally it's going to be a split custody, a 50-50 shared. I'm not sure how far they are until getting that passed, whether or not the judges or politicians agree with it or not, or that part I'm still trying to figure out.
To switch gears a bit, one area of interest you have in terms of men's issues is media representation of men. So it appears that fictional media and journalistic outlets that portray men in a thoroughly demonized way. So do you have any thoughts on that? Is there anything improving, or is it kind of going on a steady downward spiral?
It's weird. I think it's improving in some areas and heavily going down a downward spiral in other areas. Like it's acknowledged. We're starting to slowly acknowledge men's issues. Like it slowly crept into the media, but again, now we see that recently, a feminist who ran the Department of Psychology, just forced toxic masculinity into that Department of Psychology, and so now every media outlet is going to cite that department's study, that bias study to do it. And now we've seen, even with, I believe, Wikipedia, the simple act of Wikipedia, they said they have like feminist meetings. They have meetings like annually to put a feminist perspective on their resourcing, their sourcing material. So now we're, if you're talking about men's issues or gender equality or feminism, you're going to get a feminist perspective on the issue, and not an objective one.
So you said that you think it's improving just a little bit. Can you cite any examples?
Well, I would say it's improving as in, like, I've seen TV shows and movies start addressing men being, screwed over in family court, like not being able to see their children. Or I've seen examples in law shows about, about male victims of sexual harassment being afraid to go to the police. Like there's slightly a little more acknowledgement. There's not an entire TV show or related to it, but I'm just saying there's slight acknowledgments of it once every blue moon.
Well, I will state something that I saw within the last few years, the show The Rookie with Nathan Fillion. And yeah, men commit the majority of crimes, and we're not going to escape that. That's just going to be a common thing. And yes, the feminism and racial issues do get in there, but it's like the first episode was a case of a really big guy and a small woman, and the small woman is abusing the big guy. And it really challenged the narrative of, well, how could that little woman hurt that big guy? Well, he's not going to do anything to her. And in fact, they kind of like red herring it that it was him abusing her, but it wasn't. But it was just like later he ends up dying because she has like a broken bottle just stabbing him, and he's not doing anything to defend himself. So I think that's one example where we're just getting a shock value of an actual men's issues.
So how do you approach bringing to light male victims of domestic violence? And in particular, how do you approach the issue of sexual violence towards men?
That one's a little more difficult because that is the key question. How does someone go about like addressing that, especially considering the decades and decades of media portrayal of just female abusing, and like I said, there's entire like commercials of that are considered to be humorous of women like hitting and attacking their husbands in commercials, and it's just considered to be funny. And it's like, so how do you combat that? That's a really tough one that I'm still struggling to figure out. I mean, the best I could do is just acknowledge the double standards in the media and acknowledge that or to try to put the person in that other person's shoes and say, how would you feel if this was the other way around and there was entire people making fun of making fun of you being abused. It that's my current one, but I wish I had a better a better, more direct example of how to fix that.
Well, one of your articles, you mentioned the Gillette ad. Perhaps one of the best things that happened as a result of that ad is that there was a boycott of their product. In fact, I was a Gillette user. I used their Mach 3 razors. I love those razors. Stopped using them after that commercial came, and they lost. I know it was millions. I don't know if it was billions of dollars. Now, of course, they tried to blame like, oh, well, it was this or that, but it was pretty much that commercial. So do you actively support boycotting products that seem to be anti-male? Or because the danger with that is, a lot of people in the men's movement could be working for these companies. So if we harm them, we could be harming men as a result. What's your thoughts on that?
That's a good point. That I never thought about the whole, like, if they work for the company that could harm them. The best, so what I would do, I would just say that when it comes down to boycott, you got to pick and choose your battles of which one you're going to boycott, because I've seen, what I've noticed is that since the media always has virtually its own unison belief. And if one person says, "Oh, I'm just not going to watch the show again," the other media outlets are going to come out and say, "Well, we agree with this. Well, we agree." So then you're going to have to basically boycott everything at that point. So it's like, So I would just say, you gotta be able to pick and choose, your battles. Think about it and say, is this worth boycotting? Does it work? Should I just ignore it? Should I just ignore it and move on? And that heavily varies. Like I said, when it came down to dumb movies like Captain Marvel, and the female actress was playing Captain Marvel saying dumb stuff, I just ignored that. So I'm not even going to waste my time like doing this whole let's boycott, because female insecurity is clearly very marketable, as we see with Captain Marvel. So it's like, I pretty much saw that one coming. I said, yes, she's gonna get a lot of money from that film because she's pandering to insecure women. So that's not much you can do about that. Just ignore that. But when it comes down to stuff like Gillette, that's kind of a topic where men have a better say in it, because it is a product heavily geared towards men, and so it's easier for men to pull out of that topic and stop buying their products and force things to happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like you said, there's a lot more control because there's other products we can get that, we can just say, forget about Gillette. We got other kinds of razors, we can just pick and choose. Now, I guess some people might think, well, what if they start jumping into the bandwagon? Who's going to be left? Just a comment I had there.
Well, at that point, you just gotta roll with just ignore them and just buy it. If everyone does it, then you just gotta ignore it and buy the product until then.
Or maybe we can invent our own razors.
Or follow my approach: just don't shave at all.
Right. That would do.
Get though.
You can look like one of those older presidents. They always have those long beards in those photos.
I'm going for Ansel Adams. He had a big beard. How long have you been an active member of the men's movement?
Since about 2019. That's about 3 years. It's been about 3 years. Prior to that, I had found out about the movement, but I wasn't like an active member. I never thought about, like, some later on told me that I should, create a website and all that. When I heard about it, I had 2019, the beginning of 2019, I had found Elizabeth Hobson and Hannah Wallen, and I had started talking to them, and they brought up that there was an ICMI in 2019 that was going to happen. But I said I couldn't make it because I kept looking at all the other ICMIs, and they were always in different states or different countries, and I'm in Chicago. Well, how convenient. ICMI 2019 was actually in Chicago. That's just the I guess I came at a perfect time. I was able to make it. Yeah, and now we see with the whole pandemic, they're now virtual. So until further notice. So uh,
Yeah, I'm actually in charge of ICMIs in North America for I want it. We were trying for a 2022, but the recent economic is bad. So we're pushing for 2023. It's going to happen, people. I promise you. But follow up to your time in the movement. Since you've been involved, how do you feel about the current state of things? Are things improving even in a minute amount? Do you have hope for the future? Or do you think we just have so much work to do that we shouldn't really reflect on that at this time?
I have hope for the future. So I think the men's movement is heavily gonna be determined by what actions they take. I think especially around this point, I think the actions they take is heavily gonna determine their status. Because it looks like we're in a predicament where a lot of people agree with us, but they either don't agree with the movement because it has a negative connotation on it from the media, or they don't want to join it. So, because I tell people all the time, even if what you're saying is right, the history is always written by the winners. So if we don't have any success to your movement's name, then why would anyone want to join? And that's why I was part of the NTFM. I was like, well, if you say pass at least one or two bills, well, now in our city, well, then now you're catching people's attention. Now you have to do stuff. Like I said, when you have a ribbon, simple stuff like a ribbon, something that everybody can wear. Now you've done something. You've had a few basic accomplishments, and now people are like, oh, I can easily join this. I can join this movement because I have hope that things will change. If people don't have hope, even if people agree with you 100%, if they don't have hope that things are going to change, well, what's the point of joining if nothing's going to happen anyway?
Which is time for a shameful plug of my male privilege card.
I think I have one. I think Elizabeth gave me one of those.
That's awesome. But yeah, I agree with you on that point of, we just got to get out there and do stuff. And I've done calendars. I've done a magazine now. We just released our newest digital issue. I don't mean to plug for myself on X-Men's thing, but it's related to what he's saying that, I 100% agree with you. We just got to really start getting out there and doing things and getting wins, because when you have wins, people can't ignore that. Or they can, but it's harder to.
Please link that stuff in the chat, by the way, so I can get that out magazines and whatnot.
Beyond what we have mentioned, what are some other issues that are important to you?
A big issue that I wanted to acknowledge, I always wanted to bring up, I don't know if it counts because I just kind of brought this up, but the whole thing about feminist philosophy, because I feel like that's a major thing I think that drags the MRM down, that they're not attacking the core of the issue. People always say like radical feminists, and I always tell people, if you take radical feminists out of the movement, feminists are still garbage human beings. And they're garbage human beings because of their philosophy. Their philosophy is willfully misleading. And it's promoted through college campuses, it's promoted through the mainstream media, it's promoted and through now the department, now psychological and therapy departments literally promoted it. To really understand how harmful the feminist movement is, you have to attack the philosophy, the ideology, not just some people saying dumb stuff on Twitter or at a college campus. That the philosophy is the major problem. And I would like people to look up the lost cause myth, because that really because that really helps explain the issue going on with feminism right now, and how feminism was able to get away so much with their issues, despite the fact that all versions of reality shows them being the villains of the story.
You say that we have to look at the philosophy and that feminism as a whole is garbage. What is your opinion on whether or not there are actually good feminists out there? Women who just don't know there's anything more and can only fall back on their philosophy, that they're doing it for genuinely good reasons, even if they're following a bad path. Is that a possibility in your mind?
Yeah, I would say that there's some that feminism is currently the only women's movement in existence per se. So a lot of people, probably are there because they want to talk about women's issues and they have no other choice but to deal with the feminist movement because of that. It's not like they have a bunch of alternatives with all that funding with a bunch of funding and all that. So I could say those people exist. My point is that the thing about good feminists is that they're even if they're good people, they're virtually useless, which is damn near this is bad as being a bad person. It's not it, because the thing about good feminists is not just that they don't call out the bad feminists. They only decide to make themselves known when people start criticizing the feminist movement. So it's like, well why are you telling me this now versus all this time where all this bad shit was going on? Where were you then? Why are you telling me this now? And secondly, this idea about like the separation of good and bad feminists. The reason I always laugh at this is because feminists know how to separate people who they feel are misrepresenting their movement. They've done it when it came down to things related to sex work. There's a big controversy of people in favor of it versus people against it, and they made a big separation. They've done it in relation to things related to transgenderism. They're having that issue right now with transgenderism, with the pro-trans versus the turf, as they call it. They did that with race. They did with versus intersectional. They've done this in the past. They've known how to create create two different versions of feminism and say this is the one, this is the direction we're going in. And if you're not in this direction, then you're not part of our group, and denounce them and protest them to let them know they don't represent us. I don't want you misrepresenting my message. So they're virtually against people misrepresenting their message. So I think it says a lot that they don't use that strategy when it comes down to male hatred, or when it comes down to male hatred or preventing men's issues from getting passed. I think that kind of symbolically tells you what you need to know about the feminist movement.
And as they say, hell is paved with good intentions. I'm
Right.
sure I just butchered that up, but that's, I think, a good sentiment that you're expressing there. You can have all the good intentions you want, but if it leads to more harm in society, then we're not really doing anything good. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I enjoyed this conversation with you today, X-Man. I'm happy to have met you. I wish we had met sooner because you're all kinds of awesome. So
I'm always off on Sundays and Mondays, so you guys can always, contact me whenever you want.
So just real quick, what are some ways that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, my website is Humanity. You can find it at humanity87.home.blog. And you can just contact me there in the comments of any article you want, and I'll try to get back to you.
Awesome deal. Well, I hope you have a great day, and thank you for all the work you do.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. I can't wait to read your magazines and whatnot.